Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Later today in London, the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II will be held. It's estimated that some 500 heads of state, heads of government, and dignitaries will be present, and the BBC anticipates a television audience of over 4 billion, which will make this the most widely viewed event in human history. And that raises three critical questions. What is it about the British monarchy that fascinates the world? Why is Queen Elizabeth so widely admired? And can we see changes under the new king, King Charles? Joining me from Somerset in England is the United Kingdom's former High Commissioner to India, Sir Dominic Asquith. Sir Dominic, there's no doubt that Queen Elizabeth's death has met with an extraordinary response both within the United Kingdom and internationally. So let me start by asking you, how do the British people view their late sovereign? What did she mean to them?
Current foremost, they viewed her as a person. The hundreds of thousands of people who have paid their respects over the past 10 days to the Queen, I am struck how often when the media interviews them, how often they refer to the Queen being like their grandmother or like their mother. I think that reflects something very real about the period in which she was Queen. She's the first monarch of the TV age. She is probably the most observed person. Very few people outside her family can say they knew her well, but millions have seen her in the flesh, have seen her on the screen, and have done so so often that, as they say, they feel they know her. And very often the most obvious answer is the truest one. Just think of the length of the reign that she had. She represented continuity. In the living memories of the vast majority of us, she has been the only monarch we've known, certainly in my case. And people saw in her the values that they attach a lot of importance to. Simplicity, service, dedication, we keep hearing that, duty, wisdom, but then the much more human ones of care, generosity, humor, very often, and just not complaining about the hardships when they hit her. And you think back 5 years when she was 91, she was still performing about 300 public engagements a year. So these 10 days have been very much marked by memory of her. But what I've been struck so often is it's been a celebration. It's been an enjoyment for so many people to express their thanks to her because she was their lives.
When you say that many people looked upon her as if she was a grandmother, are you actually saying that despite the fact she was on a pedestal and socially well above everyone else, nonetheless she established a very human, real contact with individual people?
Very much so, and that was clear always throughout. I think there's something slightly deeper and rather difficult to express, but there is in all this, certainly in the last 10 days, this mysterious, what has been called the mysterious solace of a communal rite. People are performing a ritual which is really important to them and reflects, as well as that human element that the Queen represented for them, a sort of yearning for the mysterious or sublime, which did attach itself inevitably to the throne. And she was an embodiment of that.
Now, in a sense, the response and reaction in the United Kingdom is understandable and probably anticipated. But are you surprised by the overwhelming response internationally?
Well, think back to when to her accession in 1952. She was then head of state, I think, for over 50 territories. The empire under her rule transformed to a commonwealth, again, of over 50 states. And that was today 2.5 billion people in the Commonwealth. And they stretch across 5 continents. She's probably the most well-traveled monarch in history. She visited, I think, over 100 countries during her rule, and met in the course of that so many leaders. And that made her one of the most famous and one of the most admired women in the world. And couple that with, you would expect me to say this, but the sort of the soft power of the UK, which is immense, that soft power was very much represented by both the monarchy and the pageantry that goes with it. I think she was represented in over 100 films and TV shows. So there is, that's a bit cheap in a way, but it is a soft power, but it is also attached to her extraordinary travels and reach.
Let me quote what President Macron said the day the Queen died. Speaking to the British people, he said, "For you, she was your queen. For us, she was the queen." Isn't that an extraordinary tribute from a French president to a British sovereign?
Well, a generous remark, and I'm grateful. I think we're all grateful to President Macron for that. But it also reflects a geographical, a historical, and indeed a personal reality. The histories of our 2 countries, France and the United Kingdom, have been linked intimately for a millennium. But I think Macron may also have been speaking, in a sense, as a European, because those challenges that we face are shared, whether they be social, economic, security. And the president of the EU Commission, she also spoke in the same way. She said the Queen spoke to the heart of a nation, but to the soul of the world. And I think that's an honest appreciation of her impact.
Let me go one step further. The Crown on Netflix has carried the story of the British royal family and this Queen in particular to all the 4 corners of the world. But the series would not have had its impact if it had been about the Dutch or the Scandinavian or the Japanese royal families. So what is it about the Mountbatten Windsors in particular that fascinates people, not just in England, but internationally?
It always amuses me. The monarchy, a bit like the landed aristocracy, think of Downton Abbey. The monarchy just does, for some people, represent the embodiment of the most anachronistic institution that exists. Yet, it does have this extraordinary grip and hold on people. And maybe it is not the job of the royalty to be boring. Part of the British royal family's fame has indeed been because it's been part of the world's longest running soap opera in some cases. But here's something a bit more important. If you think of The Crown and the earlier episodes, they covered not only the human story of a 25-year-old who took on the extraordinary responsibility of being queen, but also assumed what she regarded as the sanctity that surrounds the throne. And it was trying to deal, I think, with some serious aspects of the monarchy. And again, the popularity of the Crown, I've said this before, sort of reflects the time. It was a royal family of a major power that came under public scrutiny like no other. And the royal family had to become more visible and accessible. And the Queen continuously recognized the need to introduce a more personal style into the way she she presented herself and her family. And besides her extraordinary grace, I think she also presented something of an enigma, which was attractive. The enigma was, what did she think about things? And she very seldom revealed that. And perhaps that enigma was also part of the reason for her popularity.
Let me for a moment talk not about the Queen, but the institution of monarchy, the House of Windsor. Even other kings look upon the British monarchy as special. There's a story about King Farouk when he was deposed in Egypt in the 1950s. He's reportedly supposed to have said that one day there will be just 5 kings in the world: the kings of hearts, the kings of diamonds, the king of spades, the king of clubs, and the king of England. And I don't know if that story is apocryphal, but it's been widely quoted. And that suggests, doesn't it, that even for other royal families, the Windsors are special, they're different, they're unique.
Yeah, I think it goes with the two things that we've discussed a bit. I mean, the transition of empire to Commonwealth, but when she acceded, Britain was a great power. And at the same time, this age in which she started ruling, where the visual scene, the world of images became very current. So she was very prominent as the Queen of England, with a major power, as it were, representing a major power, but at the same time very, very visible, more so than some of the other monarchies.
Now, in just over 2 hours' time, the funeral will begin in London, and practically every European monarch will be there. So too will be the presidents of the United States, France, Turkey, India, Israel, and the prime ministers of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many, many other countries. Would you agree that this is beginning to look like a funeral on the scale of which we haven't seen before, or at least in living memory?
Well, it certainly seems so, sitting here in Britain. A number of those congregating in London is going to be immense, both in terms of their stature in international terms, but just in sheer volume and numbers. As one person described it recently, it's like organizing 100 state visits in one go, which presents, incidentally, its own security challenges. But as you said in the opening shot, this is expected to be seen by 4 billion people around the world, making it the biggest live TV event in history. So yes, I would agree with your characterization.
Now, preparations for this funeral have been underway for years, actually, I imagine for decades. But do you think they would have anticipated the size and scale at which it's happening? Is this, or has this become far more daunting than they would have imagined it would be?
It is important to remember this. I mean, this is not unprecedented. It is very unfamiliar because the Queen lives for such a long time. But when Edward VII died in 1910, there was a huge 500,000 people were out paying their respects. George VI, 1952, of course, again, huge number of people out there. So it does happen when the monarch dies that a lot of people are out there paying their respects. So in that sense, it's predictable in some way. What is unpredictable in this one, unlike, for example, the Olympics in 2012, which was a huge event to organize, but what is unpredictable is just who will turn up, what the numbers of people will be. Not obviously in Westminster itself, where the capacity, where everybody's invited and they know who's going to turn up, but just in the environs and along the route from Westminster to Constitution Hill, and then there on to Windsor.
With the exception of President Biden, all the other, I believe, heads of state and heads of government are going to be taken by bus to Westminster Abbey. And I gather that probably means that the Emperor of Japan, the Queen of Denmark, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia will all be herded together. Is that usual, or is that going to create a bit of a protocol problem for some of them?
It's been much written about, Karan. I think for some, it's a bit of a difficulty to get over. But there is as people have pointed out, there is a sheer logistical problem here of getting so many people. if they all came in their individual cars, it would be impossible to organize. So people, I think, will be respectful and will recognize why, in some cases, they have to come with their fellow heads of state.
Let's talk, Sir Dominic, a little bit about King Charles. There was a time not so long ago when he was not the most popular member of the royal family. He was shy and awkward when he was young. He was blamed widely for the failure of his marriage with Princess Diana, and many of his interventions and his interests weren't always admired. Would I be right in saying now all of that is firmly in the past?
The king has won very wide admiration for the way he and the Queen Consort have responded personally to the outpouring of emotions around the country. And despite his own grief, he sought to share the celebration of his mother's life with the public. And I think, as you would expect, given this has been, as so many people have pointed out, the longest apprenticeship in history, from the close observation of how his mother went about the job, he has performed admirably. The BBC asked him some time ago, whether he was going to go on as king, whether he would speak out on matters of national and international importance, and he said, "Look, I'm not stupid. I know well the difference between being the Prince of Wales and being the king." And what do we know about King Charles? We know that he cares very, very deeply about the future of the monarchy, about the union of the United Kingdom, and about the planet. And remember, the public support for the sovereign is often much greater than that for the Prime Minister. And throughout her time, the Queen's popularity never sunk below 60%. Often it was in the high 80s. So there's a funny old thing. Lord Hennessy, I know the academic, our best living academic expert on government, said about the constitutional monarchy that it's a bit like cricket. It may look bonkers, but it just happens to work.
Now, the media in your country seems to have convinced itself that in the last 10 days under King Charles, they are seeing a new monarchical style. There's a lot of fascination with the first televising of the Accession Council, the enormous number of times the King, the Queen Consort, and the Prince of Wales have spent meeting crowds, the way they've shook hands and chatted for 20, 25 minutes at a time. Then there's the statement made by the King in his first address to the country when he promised and committed himself to serving the people with love. And finally, there's talk about his personal determination to slim down the monarchy. In your eyes, is this just media speculation and analysis, or does it carry the imprimatur of the new king?
Honestly, I think it's too early to tell. One obvious thing, every monarch will bring their own style and character to the job. But I think there is something that will be an absolute constant with King Charles, of a recognition that the monarchy is there as a unifying force above politics. And he will, as we have seen, he will go on displaying his sense of duty, his charm, and his humanity, which we've all known has been there right the way through. And he will continue to keep in mind, there's a debate about whether it's a duty or a right, but in that old adage back in the 19th century, Walter Bagehot, the right of the monarch is to be consulted, to counsel, and to encourage and warn the government. And that's what he will, I am sure, go on doing, which is exactly what the Queen did. And I think, to put it another way, that the head that is wearing the crown is wearing it a bit more easily than many people expected.
We clearly read the same magazine. You were quoting Walter Bagehot, and it's his magazine that he was perhaps the greatest editor of that published a special edition over the weekend. And can I quote the sentence that you referred to? Speaking about King Charles, The Economist said, "The head that wears the crown seems to be wearing it far more easily than many of his subjects expected. And what they were saying there is that people had a certain apprehension about what sort of king King Charles would be. And in the last 10 days, he's removed those doubts and those apprehensions. He's risen and fulfilled the role in a way that people hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think that's fair to say. But at the same time, those who have observed Prince Charles over the years recognize how seriously he takes the job. And he was honest enough to say, however long he had, as I say, been apprenticed to that job, he was honest enough to say that when he realized that the day had come for him to assume the kingship, it was a frightening recognition. So he goes into this, I have no doubt, with the full recognition of the responsibility that lies on his shoulders to do as well as he put it, his darling mother did.
My last question. India held a day of mourning on Sunday the 11th. Several Indian television channels have spent a lot of time covering the procession, the lying in state, and simply reveling over the size of the queues waiting to file past the Queen. And today, I believe one or two, maybe more channels will actually carry the funeral live. Are you surprised by the response in India?
I'm not sure I'm surprised. I'm really grateful and for the dignity that they have accorded this. I'm delighted that it is of interest, and I know, and I don't know, but I'm sure that for King Charles it will be highly appreciated. As you know well, he has a very soft spot for India. Visited it twice during my time there, I think 11 times in all. So what happens in India is certainly noted here and much appreciated.
So Dominic, thank you very much for making time for us today.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview.